We've seen rumors for a while that Sony has been changing or thinking about changing their multi-platform strategy for releasing PlayStation games that are previously exclusives on PC. But now we have the first pieces of evidence that show us that they really are thinking about doing that. We're going to talk about that evidence, but first, I want to talk about the idea behind a multi-platform strategy when it comes to Sony. Not so much for Microsoft, because Microsoft is doing this throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what will stick everywhere, which is a valid strategy when it comes to, it's a very consumer-friendly strategy because that means your games are going to be available wherever people are. But at the same time, it's also a brand diluting strategy, and so I don't really want to get confused with that. I want to stick with the PlayStation part of this for now. PlayStation has been releasing their games for a while now as ports to PC, and this is something that on my podcast and in the videos that I make, I've been applauding. And the reason that I've been applauding it is because from a consumer perspective, well, that means that more people are going to be able to play these games, which is awesome. It's also really important that more people are able to play these games if they are multiplayer-focused games. So a game like Helldivers 2, for example, absolutely 100% needs to be. Those those games as a service games or gas games, they absolutely need to have a huge player base. And the only way to get an absolutely massive player base is to combine all the different platforms so that you can actually pull from a lot of different people. It just makes sense. And Sony's also been doing this same thing with their single player titles. Now, for single player titles, you don't have to worry about hitting like a huge group of players on a bunch of different platforms in order to bring them all together so that they can all play together at the same time, making the base of your game stronger. For this, it really has more to do with the fact that console sales have been flat for a really long time. Microsoft has said this, Sony has said this multiple times. Basically, each time we get a new generation of console, the number of players that are buying that new generation of console pretty much stays the same, which means that they can't reach more and more players. And as these companies are publicly traded companies with shareholders that always seem to want infinite growth, whether that can actually happen or not, well, they have to find some other way to reach new customers. And that the only way that they could reach new customers is by porting their games to PC. And it makes a lot of sense that they would do that because, hey, we want more money for the development that we're putting into this game. They spend X number of dollars to make a video game and they reach a certain number of the population. Well, with a lot less money, they could then port that game to another platform and reach another big section of gamers. This makes perfect sense, both from a business standpoint and for somebody like me who just wants everybody to be able to play the games on the platforms that they want to play on with the friends that they want to play with. Now, I found this article over at Game Observer, and before we actually tackle this article, I want to take a second and thank the sponsor of this video. This video is sponsored by ChukeTech. We have all been there. The low battery anxiety when you know that you are miles away from an outlet and you need the power that keeps up with you. This is the ChukeTech 15 SE power bank, and don't let its size fool you. This soda can sized powerhouse packs a massive 20,000 milliamp hour capacity. It can bring the iPhone 17 Pro Max up to about 60% in just 30 minutes of charging. It also supports up to 60-watt fast charging if you have the Samsung S26 Ultra, and it can charge at up to 65 watts for laptops. It even supports a small current mode for things like your AirPods. All you have to do is double-click the power button to enter small current mode, and this allows for safer charging of various low-power devices like headphones and AirPods. And speaking of air, it's airline safe, rated at 73.44 watt hours. It complies with battery regulations for US and international aviation authorities. It also has a textured grip here, so you're less likely to drop it, but because the grip is only on one side, it lets you orient it in the dark. I know that my fingers go on the textured side and my thumb goes on the button, so now I know that the 3 ports are up here on the top. And because I haven't said it yet, I should probably point out that you can charge 3 things at the same time. Plus, it comes with this bag to keep it scratch-free. So, if you are tired of checking your battery all day long, Chook your battery with Chook Tech. Link in the description. Now, back to the show. Previously, if you had looked at Sony's website, you would have found information on there about their PC ports. But according to this article from Game Observer, a lot of that stuff has been removed. Here's what it says. The biggest change, however, is the removal of nearly all mentions of PC from the descriptions of PlayStation Studios, with the exception being Nixie's software, which focuses on PC ports. It still includes the PC platform in its profile. I think this is a really big tell that basically says, okay, look, we did the PC port thing and it brought in some money for us, and we'll talk about how much money it brought in for Sony later on in the video. But they've been doing these ports, and it hasn't been enough to justify for them to continue shining a light on other platforms when they really feel like they should be shining a light on themselves, if that makes sense. But it's not just their website, it's also XDev. And if you're not familiar with XDev, basically what XDev is they're the third-party support team. So let's say that you're making a third-party game for PlayStation, you can work with XDev in order to get them to help support you making that game for their system. Basically, you get a bunch of engineers that are experts on how to get things running well on PlayStation, and they're going to help you make your game run well on PlayStation. They've done games like Rise of Ronin, Stellar Blade, Until Dawn, Death Stranding 2, Soros, Marvel Tokon, and Kenna Scars of Cosmora? I don't know about that one. But anyway, that's what they're doing. Now, previously, they would say on theirs that it said collaborating with ambitious external studios across the globe. This was found by Zubby Tech, which is a funny name. But now it says partnering with talented independent studios to publish exciting exclusive titles, for PlayStation players worldwide. Essentially, they're going through, and every time that they mention PC or that they don't mention exclusives, they're going through and scrubbing that PC off of there or adding in exclusives to make sure that they are framing that they are all about exclusives now. And it isn't just XDev, because another PlayStation Studios counterpart has updated their website too. Valkyrie Entertainment made a similar change. It says its previous description stated a well-respected studio known for producing high-quality work across a range of platforms from console to PC. They were mentioning PC exclusive or explicitly there. And then they said it has now been updated to providing top-tier code development expertise to several of PlayStation Studios' most iconic and award-winning franchises, including Astrobot, Helldivers 2, and God of War. And all they really have done is taken anything that mentions PC out and anything that is multi-platform and just removed that to not talk about it. Now, the evidence might be new, but the rumors have been around for a while. You go back to, I think it was February, Jason Schreier was talking on the Triple Click podcast, and he was talking specifically about Wolverine, which is the newest game coming from Insomniac, the same people who made the Marvel Spider-Man games. And here's what he had to say. I wouldn't be surprised if it never came to PC, Schreier remarked on Wolverine, saying that the title is more likely to remain a PlayStation exclusive rather than turn into a multi-platform release like previous Insomniac titles. Sony has been speeding up the porting process, thus shortening the exclusivity period of first-party games, but from what Schreier said, we could see a significant slowdown in the coming months. So basically what this article is saying is they're looking at the amount of time from when the game releases exclusive to PlayStation and then on Steam, and then if you shorten that, fewer people play, which is the opposite of what I would think would happen. And honestly, I don't think that those two things are actually linked in this case. I think this has a lot more to do with the fact that they're sequels. When you look at Spider-Man, it's the first time it's available on PC. A lot more people pick it up for PC and they play it, and maybe they enjoy it, maybe they don't. Then when the sequel comes out, if you're anything like me, if you didn't pick it up the first time, you're probably not looking to pick up Spider-Man 2 because you haven't played the first one and you kind of want to figure out what's going on with the story there, so you don't pick up the sequel. And then the people who did pick up the first one, well, some of them enjoyed it and some of them probably didn't, or maybe some of them ended up buying a PlayStation because they played Spider-Man 1 and then Spider-Man 2 was an exclusive and they're like, well, I'll pick up a PlayStation. And so now they're not going to play it on Steam. Just because less people played doesn't mean it has to do with the shortening of the latency window, the lag window. I don't know what you want to call it. The amount of time from exclusivity to multi-platform. I don't think those two are really related. And just for example, let's take a look at this article from Push Square. It says that Sony has made $1.5 billion from Steam since beginning to port its first-party titles to the PC storefront. Now, storefront, not Stormfront. Now, that number, 1.5 billion, that is a lot of money. Until you compare that to what Sony usually makes just from PlayStation on just one quarter, because that 1.5 billion was spread over 5 years. Let's take a look at one quarter, $7 billion in revenue from the PlayStation division in just the last quarter. So that 1.5 billion sounds like a huge amount of money. And yes, if you have the opportunity to make $1.5 billion, of course you're going to take it. However, if at the same time doing that dilutes your brand, I can understand why they would step back. And this doesn't even take into account the fact that Sony also has to pay Valve 30% for every game that is sold on their store. Sony doesn't have their own PC store right now. I know that we've seen a lot of rumors about it, but it seems like maybe they're going to step back from that, especially if all this other stuff pans out. And then the article goes on to say that Helldivers 2 is their #1 seller on PC, and then you follow that with Horizon Zero Dawn and God of War. But then the sequels to Horizon Zero Dawn and God of War, they do the exact same thing that Spider-Man did. They make less money than the previous one. And if you look at the arguments that I made for why Spider-Man 2 didn't make as much as Spider-Man on Steam, it makes perfect sense why God of War Ragnarok and Horizon Forbidden West didn't make as much money on Steam either. They're sequels. Now, I have seen some arguments that say that the whole reason that Sony is making these changes is specifically because of the Steam machine. I don't know that I 100% buy that, although I do think it's probably part of their calculus. Peter Dalton, who is a technical officer, I'm probably getting that wrong, over at Bluepoint Studios, which was recently shut down by PlayStation, by the way. He posted this over on Twitter. He said, "Some people frame this as a response to Xbox, but I'm not convinced that's the real driver. A more interesting possibility is the rise of Steam-based console ecosystems. Consoles largely exist because they provide a cheaper, simpler alternative to gaming PCs. For most households, a dedicated gaming console is easier to justify than building or maintaining a high-end PC. However, if Valve releases a new Steam console that provides a console-like experience while still giving players access to the entire PC game library, including PlayStation games, well, that means that people wouldn't need to buy a PlayStation." And for him to throw Xbox out on this doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me either, because that's exactly what Microsoft is doing with the Xbox Project Helix. I forgot its name there for a second. They are also bringing basically a console-like experience that plays PC games, including Steam games, to the living room. And that also is going to be able to play all of PlayStation's games. So if Sony wants to make sure that people are buying their hardware so that they can control that part of the market, well, they have to pull a lot of their stuff out of Xbox and out of Steam, because otherwise people are just going to buy those systems instead of a PlayStation. I mean, think about it. If you have the choice between buying a PlayStation that can play PlayStation games or buying a PC, either from Microsoft or from Valve, that can play PC games and play PlayStation games, why would you buy the PlayStation? That's a question that I think a lot of people have been wrestling with. And it's the same thing that people have been asking about Microsoft. Microsoft, why are people going to buy an Xbox if you're going to ship your games over to all of the other platforms? It kind of doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I understand why they were doing it, because they wanted to reach as many customers as possible. And I think that Microsoft just doesn't care about hardware, but clearly Sony still cares about hardware. And I have to say, it worked on me. The combination of Sony pulling back on multi-platform, and then the fact that they recently raised the price of the PS5 and PS5 Pro, I went out and I bought a PS5 Pro before the price increase because I knew that I was going to want to play some first-party Sony games, and I wasn't going to be able to play them on PC, and I wanted them to look as good as they possibly could, so I ended up spending that extra money on a PS5 Pro. So it worked on me. Maybe I'm part of the problem. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below, and if it's your first time here, please subscribe. From the Nerd Nest, I'm Bill. Thanks for watching. Stay rad, everybody.